What is happening, everyone? Welcome back once again to Chattin Pony, and we are in San Diego. We're in the boxing club today. We've been here, there and everywhere while we've been in America filming these, but yeah, I've got another interesting guest on today. Paul Rabil, introduce yourself, my man.
Yeah, man, I'm pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. I am now a former professional lacrosse player. I played professional lacrosse for about 15 years, almost 15 years, and then I decided to change it up too and started my own league with my brother called the Premier Lacrosse League because whether you or most people listening didn't know at one point that pro lacrosse existed, still might not, and we're changing that. So that's the high level of me. Former athlete, current co-founder and president of the PLL.
So there was no professional lacrosse at all?
No, there was, and that's what I was playing in for 10 years of my career. My rookie wage was $6,000, and then I was getting paid as the MVP of the league at one point $15,000 for the whole season. So this was during a time too where we saw the rise of MLS, the rise of UFC, the rise of F1, because prior to us really trying to take a big swing at building professional lacrosse, there was just a huge moat around pro sports. It was the NFL, the NBA, MLB, and that was it. And you'd either have to have loads of money to get involved or a network deal, and it was impossible to get a network deal without loads of money. So it was just that's where we were. And so everyone kind of slotted in and tried to pick up the breadcrumbs, and then introduced social media and streaming. And that really unveiled the launch of emerging leagues. And so we were just sitting at bay as athletes, kind of struggling to make ends meet and caring deeply about the sport that we were playing. There was also, Paddy, like an embarrassing component about being a professional athlete.
And that little.
You and I were having a conversation about all the shit that we do, like trying to stay fit, and then all of that blood, sweat, and tears into nothing. So a lot of that was riding on me for quite a bit of time, and decided to do something about it.
So did you, like, $15,000 a year doesn't sound like even enough to get by, to be honest. Like, did you have a day job there as well, or?
I did. I for the first 8 months, at least, my rookie wage was $6,000, and I was playing in Major League Lacrosse. And then I took a job in real estate, trying to figure out how to make some additional income, and that just wasn't me. And I was lucky enough early on to be on social media, right at the turn when that began to happen. And this brand, Under Armour, took a look at it and saw that I was uploading and posting videos, and I kind of fancy myself a marketer, second to being an athlete. And so I kind of understood the platform, so they gave me an endorsement to basically be this athlete that they could kind of see in a petri dish, even though I was a lacrosse player, what kind of shit I was doing that they could talk about with their footballers and hoopers and things of that nature. That's at least how I viewed it, because why the hell would they sign me? And they signed me for more money, you know, on a multiple than I was getting to play in the league that I was in. So I knew that some writing was on the wall, which was actually figure out social media. And that's when I quit my job in real estate.
Yeah, so as you say, social media has been such a game changer for all sports, but obviously it's the smaller sports what have benefited more, like as you say, your own UFC, all the sports like this, what wouldn't have got the attention what they got without social media and streaming and stuff like that.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think that now social media, I used to call it new media, and if old media was television, print, and radio, new media became the primary source of media for millennials now, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, and we're all as executives now, at least I put the hat on as our president of the PLL, you're starting to graph viewership across the board. So it's not just, in your case, pay-per-views or who's watching on ESPN or ESPN Plus. It's also who's watching the post-fight analysis on Twitter and YouTube and Instagram. And the aggregate, the sum of all parts, is far greater than it used to be. And so what we see now is, like, social media is normalized. It's also can be crippling at times, which I know athletes can talk about, and entertainers or just celebrities. And you got to be careful the way you talk about it, because athletes, entertainers, we're blessed in a lot of ways to be able to do something on center stage, something that we love. But I think it's okay to express pain and challenges that we have with it. But ultimately, you know, I think the modern athlete is entering a much more sophisticated environment of social. So when I was first on it in 2008, I mean, I could just post that I'm going to Chipotle and everyone would retweet it because it was fascinating to find out what a pro athlete was doing, right?
Yeah.
And so there was no bar. The bar was so low, and now the bar is really high. You have to be interesting. You have to be engaged. Otherwise, like people are going to talk to you and all this stuff that makes it complicated. So I think I'm very weary. I say all of that because I know that it's not as simple as this, you know, one-page manual. You're an athlete, be on social media and post all the time. It's complicated, it's tricky, and you got to understand where you are personally in your life, understand what the purpose is for social related to your career, and it's all complicated. I'd be curious to how you think about it.
To be honest, social media has changed my life, because without social media I wouldn't get the sponsors and stuff like that. But lad, the problems that I have had with social media sites, lad, you don't even understand. I'm on my third Instagram.
Third.
Yeah.
Wow.
First one got disabled on 187k. Second one on 920k. You know what I mean? And then now I'm on
Why'd
my
they get
third.
disabled?
Just sticking up for myself and sticking up for people that, like, on my page. The last one was the worst, lad. On my page, someone said something about a child that was in like a critical condition. Someone commented something nasty about him, so I said something back, and then my account got took off me, which it really annoyed me. But as I say, Instagram, I don't mind now. I've got my Instagram back. Twitter, I've got it in for use. Twitter have disabled me Twitter now, so I haven't got a Twitter anymore. They don't even like say, oh, it's because of this or it's because of that. It's just boom, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky. Have you tried to reach out to them or anyone?
Oh yeah, like a lot
of
of people have tried to reach out, but obviously we just made the new Instagram. I think Twitter the same, because I've already had a Twitter ban last year. As I say, once again, for defending myself. You know what it's like for the professional athletes. You've been called, I bet you, everything under the sun on social media, and I'm a bit of a biter. So
yeah,
people say stuff to me, and I'll say, "Oh, shut up, you fat divvy." Know what I mean? Yeah. And my tweet will get a what's it called, like, lit up. And then anyway, where my old account got banned and my new account, I don't know how they're saying they've only just realised it's me, because I made my new account last November, and the night before I fought, my account just got disabled. The night before I fought the other week, my account just got disabled, and the same because they've realised that it's me, that they can't let me have the account once you get a Twitter banned. So I'm in a mad company there, lad. I'm in the same company as Donald Trump. Know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because just the rules of engagement, so to speak, they just don't apply the same way if you're in the spotlight.
We'll talk about for you, because you're a fighter, when you threaten to beat somebody up, they deem you as inciting violence.
I don't even threaten to beat anyone up, though.
But your opponent, when you threaten to beat up your opponent.
Oh yeah, they've done that to me before, yeah, when I've like said, oh, I'm gonna punch your head into my opponent.
Well, isn't that, it maybe is the parallel. I've heard this, I don't know that it's true, but I've said it before. If you're if you're a UFC fighter, I assume it's the same, but I remember if you're licensed by the state fighting governing bodies in boxing formerly, and you're in,
your hands are lethal weapons.
Fight, your hands are a weapon, yeah, and you have to warn the person up to 3 times, otherwise you could be challenged in court for using a weapon in a fight. Is that accurate? And then maybe is that sort of the same across social?
As far as I'm aware, definitely not in the UK for a fighter, but it may be that in the US. I'm not clued up on the US laws, to be honest, so I couldn't really tell you.
Wrong person to bump into, I suppose.
But let's get back to your sport, lad. You're known as like one of the GOATs, know what I mean, of lacrosse. So what's it like to be called? It's like in such a great word.
Oh man, I don't know. I've never gotten comfortable with it.
Yeah, I know. I know what you mean there. It would be uncomfortable to say it about yourself. I think that's why I think it's a bit mad when LeBron just goes, "Yeah, I'm the GOAT."
Yeah, it's strange. I mean,
rubs people up the wrong way.
There's just weird balance, right? As athletes at the highest level, and you can relate, is the only reason we get here is we have that doggedness about us that we're going to do whatever it takes to be the greatest. And it's not just and a lot of athletes have trouble talking about it because you are putting yourself out there if you go out and say, I want to be the greatest ever. Like, who says that? Muhammad Ali? And like, you know what I mean? It's a bit like, who do you think you are to do that? But you know, the odds of reaching that are so low, you actually have to have that level of dedication and venom to that committed task. Will you get there? I don't know. And especially with team sports leagues, they're different than your sport where it's subjective. Who's the best? I mean, we have the age-old debate around, is it more championships? Is it more MVPs? Is it longevity? And that's what makes sports exciting. But so you have to have that in your reserve. And then the other side of your fuel tank is this imposter syndrome. I find that like fear drives the best, the greatest athletes ever. You have just this perpetual fear of losing, of someone else catching up to you, of you not being good enough. And it's pretty sick, to be honest, because like I'll enter every session just going, I'm worth nothing. I can suck, and my last game was horrible, and everyone thinks I'm trash. And that's what drives me. That's like my fuel. And then the other side of it is, you know, so you have this, there's like this humility, there's this reverse ego that's talking. But if I weren't in the GOAT conversation, I'd be like, man, what game are they watching? You know, so it's just it's a complicated thing. It makes it difficult to to talk through, you know.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's such a tough physical sport, though, isn't it? Like, I'll be honest, a lot of people in the UK won't even like know what lacrosse is. Know what I mean? Right. To be honest, a lot of people back home won't even really know what it is. So if you want to give like a quick
for
intro.
Sure, and I'll give a shout out too. So lacrosse is a Native American game. So it was created thousands of years ago by the Haudenosaunee people. They're known as the Six Nations, and for records go all the way back thousands of years. And it was played as a form of medicine. They played it for the creator. They played it to also solve conflict and disputes. And it was typically done, the sides were made between the elders and the younger, and the elders were basically designated if you had a kid or not. And then what happened as colonists came over to North America, and at the time they're French colonists, they saw this game and they created the secular version of it that we play today. And they're like, wow, this looks really special. Old sticks used to just be welded from hickory wood out of a tree, and it's a very spiritual game that natives still play today. There was a Canadian, a French Canadian, his name was George Beers, in the late 1800s, that brought the game over to the UK. And so the game has lived in different pockets. I think similarly to how it's viewed at times in the US is viewed in the UK as like this rich, exclusive sport. And that's simply because of access and the caste system of wealth that lives in this world, right? And there's the haves and the have-nots. And oftentimes, we've talked about this before, it's not just as simple as the wealth divide. The wealth divide kind of feeds the systemic racism around the world and things of that nature. That's why I love football. Global football is like, you just need a ball and anyone can play. And you get that in a lot of ways with hoops over here. But hockey, golf, lacrosse, they're difficult to get access to because you have to have the equipment to play and the ice to play on in some cases. So that's all type of stuff that we're trying to change when we build the PLL and tell more people about the game. But anyway, that was more of the philosophical answer.
Yeah.
The short answer is, man, like, this sport is gritty. Like, it is, you have a stick that you string on your own, that it's yours. No stick is the same around the world. Different than a basketball or shared football or baseball. You have a helmet, you have shoulder pads because you hit. It has a contact of football. I can check you with my stick right across your arms in an attempt to dislodge the ball, even though I'm just trying to put a welt in your arm. And you know, there's two sides playing over 4 quarters. They're trying to put the ball in the net more than the other team. It's 10 on 10, and yeah, it's just a real badass sport.
So what, you can just whack someone else across the arm with it?
As long as you have the ball, I can give you a good lashing.
Lad, that game would get popular in Liverpool, you know.
Yeah.
Lad, people would just be whacking each other. Lad, wouldn't even be going for the ball, just be hitting each other on the shins.
I know. When I bring some of my friends that haven't played lacrosse to games now, they'll sit down, I give them this field side seat. They look over and they go, "Are you kidding me? That's illegal, what I just saw. Why would anyone want to play this sport? It seems nuts. You guys have slashes and welts on your back from someone just having a go at you." was it? How is that legal?
Yeah,
So
because what you use, they're heavy as well. You know what I mean? You're getting
Yeah.
it with one of them, it's like getting it with a weight.
Yeah, yeah. So we have elbow pads and gloves, but I think as you get, there's always this balance. I want to be faster and more and have the most dexterity that I can, which means like smaller pads. But then I'm running the risk of, a little bit more short-term pain after games.
Yeah, but I hope the goalies are padded up then. The goalkeepers.
Yeah, the goalkeepers, they just have a chest protector and they have a throat guard, and those guys stand in the net. And these balls are dense rubber, so it's a heavy ball, and they shoot 100 miles an hour. Fastest shot I think this year went 118. So these things are coming hard, and if you get hit in the arm, they get hit in the shins, you'll see big welts.
I was going to say it's like a tennis serve, but obviously a tennis ball is not unlike what you use. Not unlike.
That's right. That's right. And we're standing from 10 yards versus cross center court serving,
Oh yeah, I'm getting handed the ball. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's hard. That gets it.
Some people who don't know lacrosse are familiar with it because these balls are used by a lot of physios.
Yeah,
to pull out the bottom of your foot. Yeah.
Yeah, and like on your shoulder and then put the weight on it. I know exactly what you mean there. Is that a lacrosse ball? Yeah. That would, lad, if that got hit at 118 miles an hour and hit you in the shoulder or something, your shoulder's popping out.
Yeah. If it hits you right in the helmet, it's gonna ring your bell pretty good.
Do they wear cups?
Do you just wear cups?
Yeah, we wear cups, especially defenders. Yeah, it's a similar thing. Kind of run the risk reward analysis because I've never got along well with cups. I think I got away with quite a bit.
Yeah, when I train, I don't really ever put a cup in to train, and there's a couple of times on camera where I've took a couple of nut shots and I'm like, why don't I wear a cup?
Right. Yeah, it's one of those. You flirt with disaster until disaster comes.
Yeah, till it strikes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've moved into Hollywood now. I've read. So tell everyone about your movie.
Yeah. So when we started, actually, I'll tie this back to what you do. When we started the PLL, we felt like, wow, this is going to be really difficult. We're motivated by purpose here because we want to build a system. We want to build a league that can pay guys 6-7 figures in wages, not 5. And we want to give our players equity in the league. That's never been done. And these guys are like ground up builders. We always hear these historic stories about the NFL where the guys in the 50s that were making nothing and had second jobs. Like, what if they had some equity in the Dallas Cowboys now for all the groundwork that they laid? And we also give our players health insurance. And we were building this thing from scratch. As I called out earlier, I'm kind of we fancy myself a marketer or media person. And I remember sitting in a room. It was actually Peter Berg, his boxing gym called Churchill. He had originally started it. It's in LA. It originally started with Freddie Roach. And they were hosting a small get-together with Dana White. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And Peter invited me, and so I went in and listened. And Dana was telling his origin story of living in Boston as a trainer, then taking a one-way flight to Vegas and convincing the Fertitta brothers to buy the UFC for $2 million and all this going through, and how they changed the rules and we're really struggling and we're $40 million in the hole. Then The Ultimate Fighter came out, which was a time buy, and this incredible story. And we get so much access to the UFC today. I always think about wow, what if they had that story in a documentary form? And so, I consider probably would be a dreamer in that most of the stuff that I want to do doesn't get done. But in this case, when we were building the league, I was like, we gotta have cameras on. So we've just been recording for the better part of 4 years, and then had an amazing director approach us in Hollywood, an amazing producer. So this director is Michael Doniger, producer is Matt Tolmack. They both have their hands in a lot of amazing projects. And then we had Uninterrupted, which is LeBron James and Mav Carter's business, which is structured around being more than an athlete, which in their words, they were like, there's not a better example of an athlete leaving a league and starting his or her own and having their colleagues come with them. So that was sort of the genesis, but we had piles and piles of content. Who's going to put this story together? So I mentioned them because they're great storytellers. Fast forward to, 3 seasons in, they just kept insisting that we record. And then we put together this film. We got into Tribeca Film Fest, which was a hugely prestigious festival that we had no business being in. And ESPN watched it. They acquired it. It's getting ready to release now on August 29th. And it's basically our story of building the league. And it follows me as a player in the league and a founder, which was incredibly dynamic and hard, all the way to me retiring last season. So I think if you're a sports fan, you'll enjoy it. And if you're a business person, I think you'll really like it as well. And we don't really hold back. I show all the moments, and unfortunately, if you're going to document the last 3 years of your career, they're mostly going to be which I wish I had the documentary and when I was like playing well. But
don't put yourself down like that, lads. Don't put yourself down. I bet other people don't think that. We're our own worst critic.
Yeah, it was a special thing to be a part of, and to your point, like now taking on Hollywood is a whole different beast than sports industry.
So when did you start filming that? Did it, like, if you say you've been filming for like 4 years, did it get interrupted with COVID and stuff?
Yeah. So we started filming when we were first conceptualizing the Premier Lacrosse League. So I was still playing in the other league at the time. So Act 1 is basically us versus them.
I was going to say, so obviously if you were still playing in the other league and co-founded this league, did you have some... They
didn't like that. So you'll see like the lawsuits and things like that we were so headstrong around our idea. But we originally tried to go work with them and offer them, some capital to see if we could figure out a joint venture between us and Major League Lacrosse. And then, we had this successful first season, and they're still running, and we're head-to-head competing. And then, boom, COVID hits. And I'll tell you, man, like, we have great investors, great ownership. If we knew that COVID was coming in 2020, when we went out to go fundraise in 2018, everyone would have been a hard no.
Yeah.
But what do you do as an athlete? I think we're blessed with these genes. Like we talked about imposter syndrome, but we just put our heads down and figure out a way. And we got through the pandemic, and now we're on the other side of it, and we've had bigger media deals and sponsors, and we're able to sell tickets and merchandise and all this stuff that goes with building a league. So that's why our producers were like, keep the cameras rolling. We were originally going to close it down after the first season. Anyway.
So did it affect the growth of the league as well as the film, COVID?
It did, actually. I guess for the film, we'll find out based on reviews and what people think about it and how they identify with the film. But for the league, what it did is that every sport around the world went on hold. So the way I kind of viewed us is if, we're all competing for viewership and sponsorship and all this type of stuff. I mean, if you talk about it, it's a totally fine and fair thing to talk about. The idea that like we're not all in competition to some degree is just not looking yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
And it's okay it's like a healthy thing. That's why monopolies are governed against. Like competition's good.
Yeah.
But if you're lacrosse and if you're the PLL and say, every other league is sprinting a marathon, the NFL is miles and miles and miles and miles and miles ahead of us as basketball, as MLS and UFC. And so it's really hard to even be relevant because you're just so far behind. And what COVID did is it just brought everyone back to the starting blocks together because we were all on pause. And then it was like, okay, who can come out of the gates? And the UFC figured it out really early. Even the WWE, they kept on going.
Yeah.
And then we were the first team sports league in North America to do a bubble. So we were out super early, and the Olympics were canceled. Our partner NBC at the time gave us all of those windows. So we were on TV a lot because we were able to figure out how to run a COVID-safe tournament. So that, in a way, it was really advantageous. Despite all the terrible shit that we're still trying to work through from the pandemic, it was advantageous for us to be able to earn a larger share of voice or attention of sports fans.
Yeah. You're not wrong there, because it brought so many more eyes to the UFC. Like, because the UFC was still able to get along and keep grinding. Like, so many more fans got into the UFC just because of that. where other team sports couldn't carry on.
Yeah. And we were able to turn on things like sports betting too, because sports betting went off because no
Yeah.
leagues were playing. So all of a sudden the governing bodies were like, cool, like we'll take a look at your business. And they gave us the blessings. So we were able to put up lines and prop bets and things like that because it's a huge part of the viewing experience for sports fans. So I don't know that we would have been able to turn that on if not for the pandemic.
Yeah. Why do you think lacrosse, professional lacrosse isn't as like popular then? Because obviously I love like rough and tough sports, and I think most Americans would, so I don't understand why it's not as popular.
Yeah, I mean that's a question that we're still trying to solve for, and I think it started getting, at least in America, it started getting fatiguing because at the youth level and in college, lacrosse started really doing this in the '90s and early 2000s, and then and for those that are listening, just kind of going up and to the right of interest. I was like gesturing on screen to Paddy, and 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 then the pro game was doing the opposite. And so you'll see in the film, there's this moment where my mother is actually talking about it. She was like, I interviewed her, and she was like, yeah, it was disappointing, like watching him play in front of 55,000 people when he was in college, and then playing in front of 500 people when he was in the pros. Like, it shouldn't be like that, should it?
No.
And she was like, I kind of felt bad for him. And so why? Well, I think lacrosse had a lot of reputational damage that had been done to it, and those things are the hardest to change, right? Like the economics of a business and hiring good people, and you can build structure, but if you can't change like the general psyche around how they think about something, then it's not going to work. And I think the UFC had a similar shift in its culture, right? Brands, I remember, because I grew up with the rise of the UFC. Some of my partner brands, like a Red Bull or an Under Armour or even like a Chevy, I worked with all these different brands that at the time, I was thinking like back in 2008, 2010, they were like, oh yeah, UFC's like really starting to take off, but we don't want to sponsor it because we're not sure like if it's too edgy or if someone's gonna like get hurt in the ring. And kind of like, boxing exists.
Yeah.
It reminds me also of like the feeling around Uber and Lyft when Uber first launched. There's always retractors, right? Like, oh, well, what happens if your driver takes you off to some area and you know, whatever happens, or if you look at Airbnb, it's like, oh, I'm staying in someone else's home, and that someone else could be X, Y, or Z, and it's just all worst case scenario. It's how our minds work. So to be able to turn that reputationally is what we're working on now, because I think if we can, yeah, I think pro lacrosse can kick ass and be watched by millions of people any given weekend.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned there, 55,000 people are watching college games of it. But like as you say,
great.
College, it's big in college. Why do you think so many great athletes commit to it, even though they know once they finish college that there's no money involved?
Well, for me at least, is because I was best at it. It's a great question because for the large part of my 20s, I was going, damn, man, I should play football, or you know, I don't know if I could have gutted it out in basketball and made it to the NBA. I doubt that, but maybe soccer in the U.S. And I was asked to go out for the Patriots at the time. Was asked if I was interested from Bill Belichick, who's a friend of mine, and we were kind of talking, and he's no stranger to recruiting lacrosse players because they kind of fit the dynamic athlete of a slot receiver or a safety. But I passed on all that because I just was so obsessed with lacrosse. I mean, you know what that feeling's like when you're really obsessed with something. And lacrosse came to me like relatively later in my life. I was playing basketball, soccer, and you name the sport. But I think when I think about passion, is it's actually not out there for us to find. It's within us. And we have these unique skill sets as human beings. We're not sure what they are, but if we're lucky enough to develop them, then we go, okay, for me, I just happen to be a really good lacrosse player. I think there are really good minds for becoming an accountant or a lawyer, business executive, an artist, a musician, a fighter, right? And if we're lucky enough to engage in that skill set alignment, it quickly becomes our passion, because things that we're passionate about are typically things that we're really good at. And then we're really good at something, we keep stoking that flame. If we become the best at something, I don't give a fuck if it's a lacrosse player or an accountant or an entertainer or a mother or an at-home father, when you're great at something, man, like nothing else really matters. You can be present there. And that achievement is really what life's about.
Well, that was literally I was going to ask you next. So, did you ever play any other sports, or was it just lacrosse? But you've just basically said you've done basketball. You played soccer, yeah? That's interesting to an American say that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have a podcast too. I'd love to have you on it one day. And no secret, I also
Definitely.
like to talk. So, so I'm like long-winded. But yeah, I mean, I love the Premier League. I've watched it for, the greater part of the last 20 years. I got introduced to it through, I think it was Fox Sports at the time in the US, and they were doing a special on Chelsea Football Club during the Chosen One days with Jose Mourinho
Yeah.
and John Terry. But John Terry's from Liverpool, isn't he?
No, he's from England. He's from England. He's not from Liverpool, like.
Where did he grow up? I always felt like he grow up in
No, that was Gerard.
he grew up in
Gerard and
London?
Carragher. Gerard and Carragher grew up in England. I think he's a Cockney. Yeah, I'm not too sure though. I don't know where Terry's from.
Didn't Rooney grow up on the outskirts of Liverpool as well?
Rooney's a
He's a
Scouser. Yeah,
Liverpool?
he's a proper Scouser. Yeah.
Right. So I was watching in that era when Rooney was 16 and had that drive for Everton.
Yeah, that ridiculous goal he scored.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like one of the best moments. So I would watch the Prem quite a bit and loved the aspect of community and tribalism and just like sheer fandom is unmatched, and it makes you feel like, yeah, this is why I'm a professional athlete. Like this stuff, you just get into it, and like everything is gone. It was actually one of the things that I feared the most launching the PLL is that I would be playing in a game and looking into the stands and looking at the corporate partner boards and being distracted. And no, as soon as you lace up and step on a field, nothing else matters. It's the
No,
best part about sport.
nothing else matters. You're not wrong there. But that's the thing I like about, as you call it, soccer for me. Compare, because I've been to a baseball game, I've been to a basketball game. Like the amount of breaks in the action.
Yeah,
When like in football, that it's just 45 minutes and 45 minutes non-stop.
it's great. I love that too. And it's closer to that in lacrosse. Football is the ultimate start-stop sport. You play for 4 seconds and rest for 35.
Yeah.
Like, hey, come on. But it's made for advertisers, right? That's why the
Yeah.
NFL business is so big. But anyway, yeah, I love the pace of play in proper football, global football. It's something that's it's equally cherished in its aggression with its multi-dimensional chess.
Yeah. Let's get back onto you then anyway.
Yeah.
You've won trophies at like professional level, college level, high school level. Like any of them stick out? Any wins stick out for you that like the most special?
Well, they're all different. I'd say like college is different than pro. Pro is different than international. The biggest difference between college, which I would consider amateur, and pro is you have a lot of help. Your coaches, even like parents, if you're lucky to have good parents and teammates, it's very regimented. Like if your practice time, you're living with your mates at university, and you're just showing up and you're clocking in, and it's a year-round effort. At the professional level, it's very regimented too, but if you're not picking up your own stuff on your own, you're gone. It's
Yeah.
commoditized. Like I don't care if you're the number one pick and have a huge contract. If you're fucking off, the team's going to cut you. And there's a sense of like caretaking in the amateur level that isn't at the pro level. And I think that's why the cream rises to the top, and you see probably just as many non-first round picks in pro sports in America have more successful careers than the number one picks overall. Because that fire inside you, that desire, like I'm ready to be on my own and work my ass off. And that's the difference between pro and college. And I would say international, we really get together as, in our case, Team USA or England or Team Canada. You're there for a month to basically put on a show if it's the World Cup or if our World Championships every 4 years. And so this like fleeting nature of the most kind of discerning or care that goes into a championship is when you represent your country and you're only in it with your mates for 30 days. And so it's really like paradoxical that the most weight as an athlete that I've had is playing for 3 world championships. I won 2 and lost 1. And they are just as amazing experiences winning as they are shitty losing. And you're there for 30 days, different than any other season where you're basically training year round. That's what makes that one different.
Yeah, they sound special. I'm like, well, what's the best thing about retirement then? Now you've retired.
Nothing yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. I miss the presence of being on the field. You know.
Yeah.
My body's appreciative of it, but I had a pretty major knee surgery after I retired, which had been planned for a couple of years. So even if I wanted to come back, I couldn't right now. But we'll cross that bridge if I ever get healthy again. It's
So what's next then? Before we move on to the Ask Paddy section, what's next for you?
Yeah, just trying to build the PLL into answering your question of why hasn't this thing worked. So that's what I spend most of my days on.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, lad, as I say, I always have a segment at the end of the podcast. I've started it recently, Ask Paddy. So people send questions in for me and you. They're usually for the guest anyway. But
well, I guess this segment's going to be interesting, given that I would assume most people don't know who the hell I am.
Nah, we've got a good few lacrosse questions here, lads. Get on this one here. Rowan Speaker asks, do you think that lacrosse provides a good background to MMA fighters? Seems like it would be solid in the sense that lacrosse develops great footwork, hip strength, hand-eye coordination, and power. I think that's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. It reminds me of your earlier question I never fully got to because I'm all over the place. But contact of football, endurance of soccer, hand-eye coordination of baseball, hockey, kind of agility of hoops. And I think in a lot of ways, like MMA is similar. It's a combination of all these different skill sets, awareness, spatial recognition. I know there's a number of athletes that train in the off season doing like MMA, jiu-jitsu, and different versions of the arts. I mean, it's hell getting into an octagon or getting into a ring. Like from a fitness standpoint, it's a whole different ball game. But it's I find I'll box in the off season. I find it really restorative and also similar like muscle groups that we're training.
That moves us on to the next question. Well, to be honest, from Dog Ears, if that's how I say it. But ask Paul if he'd rather play lacrosse goalie for one game against the best team or do a pro MMA fight.
Oh man, way rather be goalie. I understand.
Way rather be goalie, yeah.
I feel safer in the net than I would in the octagon, no question.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, just 2 more anyway. If you had to choose another profession tomorrow, then what would it be?
I mean, we only started talking about the Premier League. I would say that, well, I guess if the profession's non-sport, is we're both athletes, then I think I would have liked to have gotten involved in the arts, whether it be acting or music or art, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Teacher. I can't draw, like I can just about draw the stick, man, but acting and stuff, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, just like sport is a different form of self-expression.
Yeah.
We're just more physical, but it's all the same.
Yeah, last one then. Cooper Gastineau asks, what arena in America has the best lacrosse?
I mean, I'm biased, but
I was about to say we're all biased. I'd always say Anfield if someone's asking Premier League stadium. Know what I mean?
Yeah. I went to a school called Johns Hopkins where it was the recruiting pitch to me because I was looking at all these different universities to attend, and my coach at the time was like, "You're looking at North Carolina, you're looking at Virginia, you're looking at Syracuse." He was like, "But those schools are known for basketball and football. Our school is known for lacrosse. We're the only lacrosse-specific stadium in the country at the time." He was like, "The football lines are painted, the lacrosse lines are stitched. So after every fall season, they just power wash the football lines off." He's like, "Let me ask you a question. Yeah, you'll play high-level lacrosse at those other schools, but people are there to watch their hoopers and their footballers. It's like, would you rather be in the stands supporting your colleagues at the university, or would you rather be the one on the field where everyone's supporting you?" And I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Johns Hopkins. It was a hell of a recruiting pitch. I think if you look at the hotbeds of lacrosse, you have New York and then you have Maryland. So I grew up in Maryland, so I have good exposure to top talent. I think from a participation standpoint, the U.S. has the most players that are playing the game right now. And hell, man, I played with Team USA for 12 years, so I think we're the best.
Nice that. Of course, you're gonna think you're the best. That goes without saying.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's very American for me to say. So like also just back up and be like, I don't think we're the best at everything by any stretch. But at lacrosse, I think we have historically won the most.
that's just confidence, lad. You've got to love the confidence. But Paul, thank you very much for doing this today, especially with the little bit of technical difficulties that we've been through. But tell everyone where to find you, lad. Tell everyone about your social medias and obviously where to find the film.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you having me on, Patty. Like, I admire what you do and your courage. Would love to have you on my podcast at some point. I think
Yeah,
what you
definitely.
said
Thank you.
when all cameras were on you and all attention was on you in your last fight around the importance of talking about mental health, especially for men, resonated for me. I'm wearing this Mad Happy shirt. They're a group in LA that designates proceeds for every purchase around mental health awareness and continued progress to destigmatizing it. For a dude who fights for a living, the most masculine sport, to be able to talk about that when all of the attention is on you after a win was pretty fucking dynamic. So I can speak for at least a lot of people that feel the same way that you, and saying thank you for that. And at the drop of a hat, when we were like, hey, you want to do this? I was like, no question, I back that dude. So thank you for doing that. Thanks for having me on the show. Our doc is going to be airing on ESPN Plus around the world on August 29th, and then it'll be available on ESPN and ABC. And then you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Paul Rabil. Most of my social handles are at Paul Rabil. And follow the league. It's called the Premier Lacrosse League, and that's at PLL. And that's all I got, man. I really appreciate you.
No, I really appreciate you coming on today, and thank you for the kind words. I do appreciate them also. Legend. Nice one. Yeah, you all know the score, people. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next week.